Welcome to the debate. Today, we're dissecting a fundamental collision between two very different philosophies of creation. We're looking at the tension between the established sort of heavyweight model of the traditional film studio and a rapidly emerging concept known as the Voxel Micro Video Lab.
It really is a fascinating clash. I mean, on one side, you have the cathedral of cinema, the soundstage, the massive crew, the heavy machinery of storytelling. It's the gold standard. On the other, you have this new entrant, the Micro Lab, which promises agility, speed, and a completely different way of thinking about video.
Right. So the core question we're asking is whether the modern business landscape, driven as it is by social algorithms and, rapid turnaround, does that render the traditional studio model obsolete for the entrepreneur? Or is this micro video lab just a shortcut that sacrifices the artistry of true production? Precisely. And to put my cards on the table immediately, I'm arguing that for the small business owner, the local entrepreneur, or really the thought leader seeking actual sales leads, the Voxel Micro Video Lab is the superior choice. It represents a necessary shift toward what the source material calls precision content engineering.
And I, naturally, will take the role of the skeptic. While I absolutely appreciate accessibility, I maintain that the traditional studio model represents a standard of craft, a cinema quality that shouldn't be so easily discarded just for the sake of speed. We have to ask if micro-scale ultimately leads to, micro results. I worry that in our rush to remove friction, we're also removing the necessary friction that creates quality.
That's a fair concern, but let's look at the reality of that friction. When I analyze the source material on Voxel and this whole concept of the Micro Video Lab, what I see is a solution to a really paralyzing problem. Traditional studios, they're fundamentally built for movies. They're designed for narrative fiction, for 6-month production schedules, for an army of grips and electrics. That is just the wrong tool for the modern creator.
Wrong tool feels a little dismissive. It's a robust tool. It's the tool that built the visual language of the 20th and 21st centuries.
It's a sledgehammer when you need a scalpel. Actually, it's worse. It's a sledgehammer that costs $10,000 a day to swing. The material really highlights the problem-solving aspect of the microlab. Consider the average small business owner in the South Bay. They know they need to produce professional video podcasts or reels to drive engagement, but they're stopped cold by the barriers. They don't have the space. They don't have the capital to buy high-end cinema cameras. And even if they did, they don't have the time to set it all up every single time they have an idea.
I understand the barrier to entry argument. Gear is expensive, space is at a premium, but isn't there a value in that barrier? It filters out the noise.
It filters out the business. And it's more than just cost. It's friction. The Voxel Micro Video Lab is defined as a high-tech fast lane. It really functions as an outsourced content department. The value proposition here is the turnkey nature of the environment. The lighting is dialed in. The audio is professional grade and ready to go. You walk in, you hit record, and you walk out. It removes the friction that stops businesses from marketing themselves. It's not about making art for art's sake. It's about building a brand.
I hear you, but let me offer a different perspective. You use the phrase fast lane, and that is exactly where my hesitation lies. The traditional studio isn't just a hassle. It's a canvas. It allows for complex blocking, for lighting that changes to match the emotional tone of a scene, for a depth of field that you just can't replicate in a fixed lab setting. When you standardize the environment to the point where every video looks identical because it's efficient, you risk creating a visual drone.
But are we making Citizen Kane? Or are we trying to sell a consulting package?
That line is blurrier than you think. Audiences are sophisticated. If the micro turnaround means we're just churning out content, I question the long-term viability. You mentioned the problem solver aspect, but the traditional studio embraces the heavy post-production process. That's where the magic happens. The color grading, sound design, the pacing of an edit. You dismiss this as a negative, as a time sink. I would argue that for true storytelling, even for a brand, that time is an investment, not a cost. The studio offers space and time. The lab implies an experiment, or worse, a factory.
I think factory is actually a compliment in this context. A factory produces consistent, high-quality results at scale. But let's get into the core of the debate here. I want to talk about workflow and efficiency. specifically this idea of the fast lane versus the craft.
Let's do it, because I think this is where the biggest technical divide really exists.
The source material introduces a concept called micro turnaround. This is crucial. The Voxel model utilizes what they call a live-to-tape approach. This means the cameras, the switcher, the audio, it's all synchronized so that when you finish recording, the file is essentially done. Minimal editing is required.
Which sounds, frankly, terrifying to a traditional editor or cinematographer.
It sounds like liberation to a business owner. Compare this with the heavy post-production of a traditional studio. In that old model, the shoot is just the beginning of a weeks-long headache. You have to ingest the footage, create proxies, sync the audio, cut the timeline, color grade the log footage.
But that process is necessary. When you shoot live to tape, you're baking in your decisions. If the exposure is slightly off, it's baked in. If the color temperature is a little weird, it's baked in. In a traditional workflow, we shoot in log formats precisely to preserve the dynamic range so we can manipulate it later. We separate the capture from the craft.
And that separation is exactly what kills the momentum for an entrepreneur. In the Micro Video Lab, a creator can record a month's worth of content in a single afternoon. Why? Because the professional lighting and audio are already dialed in. They are using lookup tables or LUTs inside the camera pipeline. They aren't tweaking a key light for 45 minutes. You're sitting down and you're delivering value.
I see why you think that's superior, but let me give you a different perspective. Is speed the primary metric we should be using for video? When you say live to tape, I hear compromise. I hear a refusal to fix mistakes. I hear a flat lighting setup that never changes regardless of the subject matter.
It isn't flat, it's optimized.
It's standardized, and standardization is the enemy of nuance. If you're recording a month's worth of content in an afternoon, are you really engaging with each topic, or are you just reading off a teleprompter to feed the beast? The traditional suite, with its heavy post-production, allows you to craft the narrative after the fact. You can save a bad take, you can enhance the mood. Doesn't the micro turnaround risk making the content feel mass-produced, like a widget rather than a story?
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it ignores the reality of the market. We're talking about entrepreneurs seeking sales leads. The era of the messy bedroom podcast is over. People want polish, but a full movie set is total overkill. The lab offers the perfect middle ground, precision. You call it mass-produced, I call it consistent. If I'm a lawyer or a fitness coach in the South Bay, I don't need my lighting to reflect the emotional arc of a hero's journey. I need to look professional, I need to sound authoritative, and I need to get the video up on LinkedIn by Tuesday. Agility wins.
Agility has its place, certainly, but let's talk about where this agility happens. We need to discuss the environment itself, the micro footprint, because micro implies limitations.
It implies focus, but go ahead.
In a traditional studio, you have space, you have depth. You can put the subject 20 feet away from the background. This creates natural separation, that beautiful blurry background, that bokeh, that high-end lenses provide. You can build a set. You can have people walk into the frame. The source material describes the Voxel Lab as having a micro footprint.
Correct.
To me, that sounds claustrophobic. It sounds like a closet. If you're filming every single video in the exact same tight frame, visually it becomes repetitive. You lose the dynamic range of human movement. A traditional studio allows for expansive sets, complex blocking. You can tell a story with the environment. In a micro lab, the environment is static.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. The micro footprint isn't a bug, it's a feature. It is designed to eliminate distractions. The source material explicitly mentions acoustic intimacy. This is a massive technical advantage that gets overlooked.
How so?
Have you ever tried to record audio in a large hollow soundstage or a converted warehouse without a massive investment in sound blankets and baffling?
It sounds cavernous. You get reverb, slapback echo. It requires a lot of grip work to fix.
Exactly. It requires money and time to fix physics. The microlab is treated specifically for the human voice. It eliminates echoes. It provides the visual punch of a TV set, but it is scaled down, it's efficient, it's a modular filming environment. The text uses the term voxel as a metaphor, a building block. It provides the specific building block needed for a digital presence. You aren't paying for 3,000 square feet of empty warehouse that you have to heat and light. You're utilizing a space designed for the talking head, the interview, the direct address. It eliminates the wasted space to focus entirely on the subject.
I suppose there is an argument for focus. If the background is too large or too busy, it can be distracting. And bad audio is just unforgivable.
It's the number one reason people click away. The Micro Lab solves audio through its physical design. That is precision engineering. And that leads us to the third and maybe most critical point of contention, the output, the utility of what is actually being created.
Right, what ends up on the screen.
We have to make a very distinct separation between the purpose of these venues. Traditional studios, they focus on long-form cinema. They're for films that you watch in a dark room with popcorn, wide aspect ratios, 16 by 9, or even wider anamorphic formats.
Or high-end commercials, documentaries, things that demand immersion.
Sure, but the Voxel Micro Video Lab is optimized for micro content. The source material is very specific here. It is built for the vertical 9:16 and horizontal 16:9 formats that dominate social media.
The TikToks and the Reels. The vertical format. The bane of every cinematographer's existence.
I know you hate it, but look at the data. These are the formats that actually drive sales leads today. For a local business, professional-grade media that is video first is infinitely more valuable than cinematic artistry. You can have the most beautifully lit scene in the world, but if it doesn't work as a vertical clip on a smartphone, it is invisible to 90% of your potential client base.
Okay, that is a compelling argument, but let me challenge you on the technical side of that. In a traditional cinema pipeline, shooting vertical is a nightmare. You shoot wide in 4K, and then you have to crop the sides. You lose resolution. You don't know where to frame the subject because you don't know where the crop will be. It's messy.
It's a massive pain. It slows everything down.
However, I worry that if we build our studios only for vertical, we're limiting the depth of our communication. We're succumbing to the attention economy rather than challenging it. A traditional studio setup lets you create something that demands attention rather than just snacking on it. Are we sacrificing the potential for deep, meaningful content just to fit into a feed?
I think that's a false dichotomy. The lab handles both. The source material mentions it accommodates guest interviews for deep dives, that's the acoustic intimacy part, and it is set up for batch producing TikToks.
But how does it handle both without the hassle of reconfiguration?
That's the engineering. The cameras are often mounted in portrait mode, or they use sensors that allow for a full vertical readout without cropping. The point is, the entrepreneur doesn't have to know how it works. They don't have to worry about aspect ratios or export settings. They just speak. It solves the doing video problem.
The doing problem?
Yes. Stop doing video, start building your lab. That's the headline. The biggest hurdle for entrepreneurs isn't a lack of artistic vision. It's the logistical nightmare of execution. By solving the output format, by making it native to the lab, the entrepreneur can focus on the message, not the medium.
I come at it from a different way, but I have to admit the pragmatic appeal is strong. If the goal is business growth, the friction of the traditional studio is a legitimate killer. I've seen many projects die because the setup time was just too daunting. They booked a studio for one day, missed a shot, and couldn't afford to rebook.
And that is exactly why the Micro Video Lab is the winning argument for this specific demographic. It allows for failure.
Failure?
If you can record a month's worth of content in an afternoon, you can afford to have a few bad takes. You can experiment. In a traditional studio, where the meter's running at thousands of dollars an hour, the pressure is paralyzing. The micro-scale cost structure allows for experimentation. It creates a safe container for the brand.
That's an interesting paradox. You're saying the standardized, factory-like environment actually frees you up to be more creative because the stakes are lower.
Precisely. It is not trying to replace Hollywood for the next blockbuster. It's trying to replace the amateur setup that is holding businesses back.
It's the professionalization of the influencer economy.
It is precision content engineering. It takes the variable of production quality and solves it with a constant.
I still struggle with the term engineering being applied to creativity, but I see the utility. When you treat content like a widget, when you batch process it, I worry it loses its spark. But I cannot deny the utility. If I'm a CEO, I do not want to pay a crew for 12 hours to get 3 minutes of usable footage.
You want the library. You want the asset. And to bring this to a conclusion, I want to summarize why I believe the Voxel Micro Video Lab is really the winning argument here. It's about high-end production with micro-scale hassle. For an entrepreneur, time is the most finite resource. Money is second. The lab solves for both.
It optimizes the resource allocation.
By removing the friction of setup, that whole turnkey aspect, it allows businesses to create the volume of content necessary to generate sales leads. You can't generate leads if you're silent. And the traditional studio, by its very nature, encourages silence between major projects because they're so hard to execute. The microlab encourages constant communication.
That's a fair assessment. While I will always champion the traditional studio as the gold standard for narrative film and, deep, complex storytelling, I have to admit that the Voxel model offers a very compelling, very pragmatic solution for the modern creator.
It's the right tool for the job.
It is. For the specific purpose of business growth and social presence, the turnkey efficiency of the LabMid is just hard to argue against. It solves the logistical paralysis that plagues so many potential creators.
It lets them stop doing video and start building a library.
And that is a crucial distinction.
It seems we agree that the very definition of a studio is changing. It's no longer just a place to make magic. It's a place to do work.
It's adapting to meet the video-first era.
So for our listeners, the question becomes, what are your goals? Are you making a movie or are you building a brand? Because if it is the latter, the Micro Video Lab is the engine you've been waiting for.
And if it's the former, well, call me. I know a place with a great soundstage.
Always the romantic. Thank you for a rigorous debate.
It was a pleasure.
That concludes this episode of The Debate. We will see you next time.